And we are back. Welcome to January officially. This is your first of many, many videos where we're going to be talking about nutrition things. At the beginning of this course for our first video, besides my intro, which if you didn't watch that and you have no idea who the heck I am, probably a good idea to go back to the group and see who I am. My name is Dana, in case you missed it, and I recorded a video on my nutrition background and why I care about this stuff and all the things that I hope to bring to the table for you guys this year. So the first video we're going to be doing today is the most common objections to meal prepping / how the heck do I do this and not drive myself crazy or eat the same thing every single day is basically the title of this entire video. Also, look at me looking all official, but I'm so short that you can't even see the Meal Prep on Fleek logo in my video. So just know it's there. So the first one that we hear a lot with meal prepping, and I hear this a lot in my practice too, is I don't know what I want to eat every day. Same. I also don't know what I want to eat every day. And quite honestly, thinking about what I'm going to eat for every single meal of the week, including breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and having to shop and prep for that seems super daunting and also exhausting when honestly, I don't even know what I want to eat for dinner tonight. Keep in mind, I'm not currently doing the version of meal prep that we are talking about in the course, so that is the main reason for that. And also just ran out of time, which we're going to be talking about later today too. So the first thing that I would say to you to help you figure this out is, what do you actually like to eat? And think broadly, right? Like, what do you enjoy eating? And break it down meal by meal. This can include things that you enjoy eating when you go out to restaurants. Do you like eggs or oatmeal or banana bread for breakfast? What do you like having for lunch? Is it something like Chipotle or a rice bowl or something like that? Or maybe are you a meat and potatoes kind of person? What about different kinds of cuisines or like sauces and spices that you like? All that kind of stuff. This will give you more ideas of things you can look for when you're searching out recipes. And this also brings more of the mindful and intuitiveness side of eating out. I want you and would advise you to eat things because you enjoy eating them, but also because they make your body feel good from the inside out, right? This is where the nutrition and health side of things comes in. If you eat something and it makes you feel crappy, for example, you have low energy or you feel sluggish or you get breakouts or it gives you some kind of pain or hives or digestive issues, that's your body telling you probably not the best idea to eat this food pretty frequently. And then you can go further to digging into like, what is that? Is it, some kind of compound in the food? Is it my body reacting to something in the food plus stress, which is very common? And that's kind of going down a whole nother rabbit hole. But basically all of that, no matter the information that your body is getting from certain foods, when we can actually slow down to listen to it, is good information to have and an indication of what kind of food is going to work best for your body. Now, back to figuring out what you want to eat. Make it easy on yourself. And this is going to be the theme of this entire video when we're talking about all of these common objections and questions and just things that people want to know when they're getting into meal prepping, right? So make it easy on yourself. This is where things like Instagram and Pinterest and blogs and cookbooks and magazines and all of these things come in handy. The first thing that I would go to, if it's you guys, because it is literally a built-in resource for you, is one, the Facebook group. Nick has been sharing a lot of great recipes in there and people have already been posting about things that they've been trying. And then also the Meal Prep on Fleek website or their blog has a ton of recipes that are not only delicious looking, but they also have the nutrition information for you if that's something that you're going to be using in your meal prep plan. So that's basically like easy button from Staples, push it, there you go, it's already done. And that, is going to be the easiest because the macronutrient breakdowns are already there. And they also have a recipes ebook. If you want to go beyond that, easiest thing that I like to do is whenever I'm on Instagram and I see something that looks really good, I just hit the save button. And then when I'm preparing or planning to prep meals for the week, I'll just go to my saved folder on my Instagram and be like, oh yeah, 3 weeks ago, I thought this would look really good. And then eventually you have a whole catalog of things that you personally have chosen that you think look really good. And then when you're ready to plan, there is your answer, right? A lot of the biggest mistakes that people make in terms of meal planning is they feel like every single week they need to search out new recipes, and that can take hours, right? Like I have definitely been there of diving deep down the Pinterest rabbit hole, and then 3 hours later you're looking at like pictures of bunnies running through a field and you're like, I came here to find meal prep recipes, like how did I even get here, right? So again, make it as easy as possible on yourself. Don't try and go to every single different resource because you will end up down that rabbit hole. Haha, punny, I did not know I was going to do that. And then when it's time to decide for what to grocery shop, go back to the basically short list that you've created. One of the other things I like to do in addition to the Instagram save feature is to have a board on Pinterest called recipes to make. So that whenever I'm looking for inspiration for things to make, I go to my own Pinterest board instead of going to the Pinterest homepage, which can also be a huge rabbit hole to go down. And then I can just go there and be like, oh, these are all the recipes that I have saved, and I can go there. Back in the day, I used to do this with magazines, and I used to buy a ton of them and then tear the recipes that I wanted out of the magazines and make it into a scrapbook. So I guess that's kind of the old-fashioned version of Pinterest on paper. But yeah, so those are things that you can do to figure out what you want to eat and make it easier on yourself. Second question that we're going to get to is, I don't want to eat the same thing every day, and it kind of seems like that's what I'm going to be doing when I'm meal prepping. I also don't want to be eating the same thing every day because that sounds really freaking boring, even though that would make your meal prep super easy. So, ideas for this. One, don't just make one recipe and eat the same thing every day. Sure, it might be delicious the first or second time, but by the end of the week, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so boring, And so different things that you can do without spending eons of hours in the kitchen is pick out maybe 2 recipes, like full recipes that you want to make each week. And then if you start to get tired of eating them, freeze individual portions and you can eat that the next week. That's also going to be a recommendation that I give later in one of the other questions. Then in addition, what you can do to that, which is what I really like to do, is ingredient prep. So for example, you would do chicken or rice or roasted vegetables, sweet potatoes, eggs, whatever proteins and other things you enjoy doing. And then you think about your fridge with these prepared ingredients as like Chopped on the Food Network, which if you don't know what that show is, definitely get on that. Something to binge for you this weekend. Or you can think of it like building a bowl at a place like Chipotle or any other fast casual restaurant. So you've got your bases, you've got your proteins, you've got your veggies, and you've got your kind of sauces and spices and like add-ons that you can do. And you can think of it that way when you're doing prep as well. So then you want to fill in each one of those categories, at least one, if not 2 of them, so that when during the week, say the latter half of the week, you're like, all right, I'm done with recipe number 1, done with recipe number 2, don't feel like eating those anymore. You can then go to your fridge and say, oh wow, I have all of these things prepared already. And now instead of eating the same thing every day, you can mix and match all of those things as a kind of like buffet style or like taco style where you just pick and choose things. Make your own bowl. Bowls are my favorite thing to eat out of. And then throw like a spice or sauce blend on top of it, and it can taste different every single day. And then one thing for you guys to do here, before I go any further, if you have, since this is a community right here, if you have tried any recipes that you have loved so far in your meal prep journey, or things that you've tried before that you just loved as a family or you loved yourself, post them in the group so that other people can try them out too, because hello, food is love and you want to spread the love via recipes in this group. So either you can do that under this video or you can do that in a new post and be like, hey guys, thought you might like this recipe. If you like, fill in the blank, because people are always looking for new recipe ideas. And frankly, even though some of the recipes on the internet have like a lot of reviews and stuff, you don't know what those people's taste buds are like, right? So going from a friend or someone in a group that you're part of who you already know you have a lot of common interests with, that's a really great way to find recipes. Okay, next question, number 3. I don't like to cook. Okay, so little tough love coming here, but I'm also going to give you some practical tips and a solution. If you don't like to cook and you're in a meal prep course and your goal is to have meals that you can eat throughout the week, you're gonna have to get over this a little bit because you can't wave a magic wand and have your food on the table for meal prep throughout the week. That's called takeout or delivery, which is not a bad thing, but that's kind of something that we're trying to steer away from here for the most part. But that also doesn't mean that you have to be spending hours and hours in the kitchen, which is what a lot of people associate with meal prep, right? So a couple of solutions for things that you can do here. One pot meals. These are a godsend and they are amazing. Basically, what a one pot meal is, if you don't know, is you have a big skillet or a pot or something, and everything that you do to cook that one meal goes in that one pot. You eat, if you want, out of the pot, or you can spoon it into different bowls, different portions, whatever. But basically, you're only gonna have to clean one dish, or maybe a dish and a cutting board and like a measuring cup or something like that. That makes things a lot easier. And usually those types of recipes are pretty like set it and forget it, which is what you want to do if you don't love spending all that time, for example, like stirring a red sauce for hours or like making a risotto or any of those more like time and hands-on intensive dishes. Another thing that I would recommend is either investing in a slow cooker or an Instant Pot. If you work long hours, slow cooker is the best thing in the world because in the morning before you go to work, or maybe sometimes even the night before, you chuck all the ingredients in the slow cooker, you put the top on, and you press whatever the time amount is, usually between 5 and 10 hours. And then when you come home from work, it's done. So you can have like as little as 5 minutes of prep and then a delicious meal when you get home from work. Or say if it was Sunday, you check everything in the slow cooker in the morning, and then Sunday night, you're done. And it's the greatest thing ever because the other super nice thing about the slow cooker is it's in there for so long that it allows the flavors to develop over a really long time, so it tastes even more delicious. And slow cooker meals are also great for leftovers the next day because the types of meals you tend to make in the slow cooker tend to sit really well in the fridge and the flavors come together even more, so it's even more delicious the next day. Other thing, if you're not going to do a slow cooker, is an Instant Pot is a really good idea to cut down on time, to save money, and to basically make things in a flash. So if you don't know what an Instant Pot is, it's basically an electric pressure cooker, which can cut down the amount of cooking time by, I think it's like at least half, if not a third or a quarter. So for example, I make rice in mine all the time, and the timer on there, I think, is for 8 minutes. And then you let it sit for 10, as opposed to an hour for stovetop rice if you're doing like a big batch of it or something. So that'll save you a lot of time. And that's another one of the things that can be a one pot meal, because if you get like the brand Instant Pot, which I'm sure Nick can throw a link to in the group, it has like a saute function, it has a soup function, you can do oatmeal or rice in there. So basically what you can do in addition to slow cooking and pressure cooking, you can start to saute things in there and then stick the top on and leave it as a slow cooker, which is great. Or a pressure cooker, same thing. So I've made like soups, rice, I've made a whole chicken in there, I've made beef shanks in there, I've made chili in there, like you name it. Besides like a salad and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I've made a lot of things in there, which is great. And then the other thing that you can do, my last recommendation, and this is more meal prep style, I would guess, is a sheet pan meal. These are also genius because this can be something where you have a bunch of veggies, maybe some potatoes and some kind of protein, and you're cooking it all together on one sheet pan. So there are a ton of sheet pan recipes out there. You can find sheet pan recipe roundups on like BuzzFeed and Google and literally everywhere. But for an example of this, it could be like asparagus and salmon and potatoes. And the only tricky thing about sheet pan meals is that you want to cut the ingredients in a way that they will all finish cooking at the same time. But if you're following a good recipe, it'll tell you exactly what to do. But basically, so if I was going to do that example that I just mentioned, it would be cut the asparagus into stalks, slice the salmon into probably 4 to 5 ounce pieces, and then cut up the potatoes relatively small, and then you drizzle them in olive oil and some spices, whatever you do, pop it in the oven, you're done. And then you eat it when it comes out. And you only have to do, again, the dishes for the sheet pan, the cutting board, and probably your knife too. And that might be it, which is great. Other thing that you can do here is to get some what I like to call real food convenience foods and always have those on hand because you're going to save a lot of time in the kitchen. And if you don't like to cook, this is going to save you a lot of headaches too. So some examples of these are getting minute rice. So I go to Costco a lot and get things in bulk. And there is this brand that honestly, I don't even remember what it's called, but they have this brown rice in these packets that have like 2 to 3 servings in there. And they take a minute and a half in the microwave and then it's done. Instead of an hour on the stovetop or even, 20 minutes in the Instant Pot. This is really great to have on hand if you come home from work late and you don't have anything prepared. And then you can go to a meal that you have in the freezer. You can do your ingredient prep or build a bowl like we talked about before. And then you can just throw the rice in the not the refrigerator, in the microwave, and it's done in 90 seconds. The other thing that I sometimes like to keep on hand, or this is something that I will do when I get back from traveling, or if I know I'm going to a conference, I'm not going to have a lot of time to prepare this week, grab a rotisserie chicken. They have them pretty much at every major grocery store. Even Target has them now. You can get them at Costco. You can get them at Whole Foods. You can get them at Target, Giant, Safeway, whatever the local grocery store is near you. And then you can have an entire chicken for a week of meals if you're by yourself, or, a Sunday dinner, or maybe one dinner and one day of leftovers, depending on how many people you have in your family or how much chicken you like to eat. That's another great tool to have on hand too. And then getting pre-cut vegetables is going to be your best friend. Now, when you're doing things like these real food convenience foods, the only, barrier or obstacle here is you either have to go with convenience or you have to go with cost. So if you want to save a lot of money when you're meal prepping, which we're going to be talking about that in a few minutes too, then you probably want to buy whole versions of things and then you're going to be breaking them down yourself, like a butternut squash or broccoli or Brussels sprouts, which do tend to take a good amount of time to break down and can also add some time to your meal prep. However, I'm the kind of person who will never buy an entire butternut squash because it takes forever to break down. So I always buy pre-cut butternut squash. So if you're making something like a butternut squash soup, it's going to save you a lot of time to buy pre-cut butternut squash. For example, my cousin, on my website, I have a butternut squash stuffing recipe that's gluten-free that we usually make for Thanksgiving and Christmas. My cousin texted me that he was going to make it, and he texted me like an hour and a half into attempting to making it. This recipe is supposed to take maybe 15 minutes of prep, right? And he goes, "Oh, I think I bit off more than I can chew." I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's really just like a dump and go kind of sheet pan recipe." And he goes, "Well, I spent the last hour and a half cutting up this butternut squash." And it was just like, this is why you buy pre-cut vegetables. Not all the time, but butternut squash is one of those things that I always will spend a little bit more just to save myself at least 20 minutes to sometimes an hour of time, right? And then the other thing that you can do for real food convenience foods is if your grocery store has a freezer section like Trader Joe's, that is a gold mine. They have burgers, they have frozen fish, frozen chicken, like frozen beans, like all these different kinds of very simple minimal ingredient. They also have rice there. Minimal ingredient things that can cut down on your prep time and cut down on your costs a lot too. So that's something else. And then speaking of costs, next question, a lot of people say meal prepping is too expensive. And I would actually challenge you there. Like, let's figure out for you how expensive meal prepping would actually be versus what you either are doing now versus what you might have been doing before. So I want you to take a piece of paper, or you could do it on your phone, wherever you want to do it. Write down all of the money that you spend on food throughout 1 week, including for you and your family or whoever you live with, right? So that includes groceries, coffee shops, restaurants, fast food, fast casual places, snacks you pick up at a convenience store, everything that goes in your mouth that you have to pay for that is food. I want you to write that down for a week. You're probably going to find, I would say 99% of the time, that it is way more expensive not to meal prep. Because if you think about it like meal for meal, if you prepare something like, let's say, an egg frittata with sweet potatoes and avocado, or like egg muffins or whatever that is, versus eating out at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast every single day, the cost comparison is like there's no comparison. You're saving so much money just on one meal in 1 week. So now think about, okay, if I go out to, let's say, a fast casual restaurant like Chipotle or some kind of salad place or whatever, you're usually spending, and Chipotle is one of the less expensive ones, being like around $8 depending on the kind of bowl that you get. Usually around $10, upwards of $15, depending on the kind of lunch spot you go to. You could be dropping $25 or more at lunch alone, which for some people could be a third or a quarter of their grocery bill for the entire week, right? So this isn't to say that you're wrong, meal prepping is not expensive. Like, yeah, when you go to the grocery store and you get a week's worth of stuff for meals that you're going to be preparing, that sticker shock is real. But if you compare that one sticker shock to all of the money that you were going to be spending at restaurants and takeout and everything like that, if you just compare those two, you'll actually find that the grocery bill, even though at one time it looks like more than you would normally spend at the grocery store, you're actually going to be saving a lot of money because you're not going to be eating out as much. You're not going to be having to grab convenience foods all the time from like 7-Eleven or the gas station or anything like that. You're not going to be constantly looking for food or ordering takeout or anything like that. So here's a potent example for you. The other night on Uber Eats, I got pho, which is Vietnamese noodle soup, and it is delicious. Even if I went to the restaurant, it would have been $9, but I was just too tired. So I ordered it on Uber Eats because luckily I had credits, and it ended up being like $22 or something for the same meal. Now, if I had made that on my own, it would have been even cheaper. So these are kind of like price hacks and money hacks that you can use in your meal prepping. Okay, time to switch gears. We are going to talk about time management. And we've kind of been alluding to that a little bit, but I want to give you some very specific tips for time management. So first objection or question that we come across here is, I'm spending way too much time in the kitchen meal prepping. And I want to acknowledge this because this is something that happens to most people when they start meal planning and prepping when you first start out. Because you're basically learning a new skill for the first time and learning your way around the kitchen and learning how to do this in a maximum efficiency kind of way. Now, if you think about this like something else when you're acquiring a new skill or learning something new, say it's like a group exercise or a yoga class. If you're going to that for the first time and you've never done it before, you have no idea what the instructor is talking about when they're like, okay, go from this pose to like this pose and whatever. And you're like looking around like, what am I even doing here, right? So there's a learning curve that you kind of have to figure out at the beginning. But a few classes in, a few preps in, you're going to start to get the hang of it. Now, there's another thing to think about here is, are you being too ambitious with your planning? Right? Are you trying to make one or even maybe two different recipes for every single day of the week? That is exhausting. No wonder your grocery bill is so high, and you're probably ending up with a lot of excess leftovers at the end of the week, and you're like, I didn't even eat this stuff. What was the point? I spent 7 hours and 20 nights doing dishes. Like, after preparing all of this stuff, why did I do this to myself? Make it easy on yourself and start small. And actually, I think it was last week, Nick just posted a really good example of this in the group, so go look for that. And make it easy on yourself. Again, so tip number 1, you don't have to make everything from scratch. I remember a few years ago when I was doing this very popular, let's call it 30-day lifestyle program. That's really just a diet. They encourage you to make all of the condiments, all of the spice blends, like everything from scratch, every single thing from scratch. I would spend hours on the weekends making my own ketchup, making my own mayonnaise, making my own fill in the blank. It took so long. Don't do that to yourself unless you absolutely have to because you have a lot of different food restrictions or allergies or something like that. Buy some salad dressings, buy some sauces that you can put on proteins or vegetables, buy some spice blends. Make your life easier. Good idea to read the ingredients when you're doing that, but at the same time, you will save so much time doing that. And then the next thing that you can do is think about making easy recipes. Okay, like no one's expecting you to make Julia Child's pot au feu or like beef bourguignon or anything like that when you're starting to meal prep, or really ever, right? Maybe for like a New Year's feast or something, but that's not something that you're meal prepping for the week. So think about easy things that you can make, minimal ingredients, and like we talked about before, start using the Instant Pot or the slow cooker or one pan meals or one pot meals. Use real food convenience foods. And then also, if you are getting kind of like meal prep fatigue, which might happen at some point, think of different resources that you can go to make your life a little bit easier. If you're sick of cooking at home, think of some restaurant in your town or like some grocery store that has a hot bar or a cold bar where you can just basically assemble things and then take it home and you don't have to make another meal. That's totally fine too. In my area, some of the things that I like to go to are Chipotle for either a salad or a rice bowl. We have Cava, which is basically like a Mediterranean version of Chipotle. There are salad places, there are soup places, like generally minimal ingredient places, super healthy stuff, and it's delicious too, and you don't have to cook it, which is great. So that'll save you some time too, but that's the kind of thing that I would keep in your toolbox for really like emergency situations. The other thing that you want to keep in mind here is minimizing your time in the kitchen by maximizing your efficiency, which this happens with practice, but this is something that I would encourage all of you to strive for and kind of make it your goal, is really to minimize your time in the kitchen and maximize the amount of things that you're doing at one time so you don't have to spend hours in the kitchen on Sunday. You can go watch football, you can go play with your kids, you can go do whatever it is you like to do on Sundays instead of spending the entire day in the kitchen, because I love cooking and I don't even want to do that, right? Like I'm not a chef, but I am a food blogger, and even then I do not want to spend that much time in the kitchen, even though partly it's my job. So some ways that you can do this: you can stick multiple things in the oven at the same time. You can roast a chicken, put some veggies or potatoes around the chicken while you're roasting it, or maybe roast some veggies while you're baking sweet potatoes. I'll just give you an example of some way that I've meal prepped before and to be most efficient, least amount of time. So I will start with the slow cooker or the Instant Pot, and I'll throw something in there, whether it's the dinner that I'm going to have that night. Usually I'll just do like shredded chicken or something like that, or like a big roast, and stick that in there. Boom, you're done. Don't have to touch it until it's finished, right? Then on the stovetop, I'll get some rice going. And then at the same time, I'll also boil some eggs, for hard-boiled eggs for snacks or different meals throughout the week. And then in the oven, on one tray, I will roast some vegetables, and then I'll also either roast another tray of vegetables or I will bake some sweet potatoes in there. So you've got now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things going at the same time. And then while all of those are going, because the eggs will finish first, and then probably the veggies will finish, and then the rice, and then the chicken will finish, you can also chop up some things for fresh stuff throughout the week. So maybe you want to portion out some fruit that you're going to eat. Maybe you're going to get some raw vegetables that you can throw on your salads. Here's the time when you could make a salad dressing or a spice blend if you wanted to, or not. You could just watch some TV, take your dog for a walk, do whatever you want while all the stuff is cooking, right? So all of that stuff I can do usually in under an hour. And then everything will start to finish. You can do the dishes in stages too, so you don't have to do it all at the same time. And then if you're using a slow cooker, the chicken won't be done for 5 hours or something. Or if you're doing a bigger recipe, it might not be done for a little bit longer. So then you have time to not do all the dishes at the same time. Okay, now we talked about cooking, we're going to talk about planning, because another one of the questions and complaints that people have very commonly with meal prep is planning what I'm going to make takes too much time. And here's the thing is, I get it. You don't want to spend hours and hours planning and shopping to take up your entire Saturday and then prepping food to take up your entire Sunday. So now that we've talked about how to minimize your time in the kitchen by maximizing your efficiency, you can take the same idea and apply it to planning by going to something that we talked about before, is make it as easy as possible on yourself. Now, if you practiced or have been doing, which it's only been like 20 minutes, so you probably haven't, but if you have started to do the saving recipes to your Instagram or to your Pinterest or clipping things from magazines, if you've done that, Instead of spending hours of time trying to find something completely new every week, you can go to your short list of saved recipes, or even better idea, why don't you make something that you've made before that you know that you liked? Just make it again, right? Like there's no award for making new recipes every single week. You can also do, like we talked about before, the ingredient prep where you're building a bowl with different stages. And then eventually, once you get kind of good at this and you've done it for a couple of weeks, you're going to have staples for your pantry, for your fridge, for your freezer that you buy every week, or just whenever they run out, you're going to replenish them because you realize these things make my life easier. For example, for me, it's that minute rice. Always have it on hand. It's great. Speaking of things not taking a lot of time, let's talk about energy, because a question that a lot of people have also is, I don't have any energy to meal prep at the end of a long week. And here's a piece of advice that I have for you, or just something that you can kind of like let off your shoulders. Again, no one is expecting you to make an extravagant roast or like a crazy, 15 ingredient meal that takes hours of slaving over. You want to make it as easy as possible on yourself. And again, no one is going to win an award for like the best meal prep or the most creative meal prep. You just have to do what works for you. So if you don't have the energy to meal prep after a long week, your best friend is going to be the things that we've talked about before. Definitely the slow cooker, doing the real food, convenience foods, doing stuff that is minimal time, maximum efficiency. Okay, next section is, what about my family? Because it's not just me here for many people in this group, right? So one of the things that we get is everyone in my family has a different diet, or my partner and I don't like the same foods or don't eat the same foods. So the first question that I would ask here, instead of giving you just a straight answer, is why, right? And this isn't an accusatory thing, right? Is it just because your kids are picky? Is it because there are allergies? Is it because there are different preferences? Do people just refuse to eat certain foods? Because with kids, at least, yeah, it's hard to get them to eat plain steamed broccoli. But if you try again and again, because kids have to be exposed to things multiple times before they'll eat them, right? I have plenty of kids that I coach that eat vegetables. I didn't eat vegetables as a kid, so I see that kind of thing too, right? So we want to make it as easy as possible on you, the cook, without having to make 4 different meals every single night, because we've already talked about how preparing food takes too much time. So we don't want to add things onto that standard and that question as well. So the easiest way that you can tackle this is to kind of make like a buffet style, or build a bowl, or like a taco night, basically. So instead of making full recipes for every night, or a full recipe for every single person that is not eating the same meal, you just make ingredients really similar to the build a bowl, right? And then people can choose and pick which ones they want to eat and which ones they don't. And you can also, here's a good idea, you can also ask members of your family to help with the cooking, or to help with cleaning up, or to help with something afterwards. So for example, in my house growing up, if my mom was going to do the cooking, my dad would do the dishes, or mom was going to do the cooking and then I or my brother and my dad would do the dishes. If I was going to do the cooking, which is most of the time what happens now when I go back to my parents' house, everybody else does the dishes, right? And we found that, yeah, it took a little while to like kind of transition into that, but it will save you so much time. And then it's more of an incentive to cook, because then you don't have to do the dishes, which is the best thing ever. It's kind of like being at a restaurant. And then other question about families is, how do you scale recipes and meals based on individual and family needs? So for example, if the recipe makes 4 servings, what do you do to make it 6 servings? So the easiest solution to this is just double it, right? If you need 4, or if the recipe calls for 4 servings and you need 6, just double it. One of the best tips that I give all of my clients, and I use for myself as well, is cook once, eat twice, or cook once, eat multiple times. I very rarely make something that I can only eat for one meal. You can either have the leftovers for lunch or freeze them, and then you can have a no prep meal the following week when you defrost that, which is great. If you went to get all super mathy instead, you could divide the original recipe in half, and then add it to the original recipe. So basically you're making 1.5 times the amount of the original recipe. Also, there might be this in the calculator on Meal Prep on Fleek as well, but I know on all recipes and some other websites too, you can actually go in and select the number of people that you need servings for, and they automatically do all the calculations for you. It's like wizardry, and it is the best. So there's that. Okay, last section here. This one is called traveling and troubleshooting. First one, I don't like large meals, I just prefer small meals or snacking. Okay, nobody is telling you that you have to eat large meals, which there are a couple of different schools of thought for meal prep in the same way that there are a couple of different schools of thought in nutrition as to how many meals people should be eating per day, which the answer is whatever works best for you. If you don't like eating 3 meals a day, don't eat just 3 meals a day. You can eat 4, you can eat 5, whatever you want, right? So, for example, here, if you made a big recipe and it calls for 4 servings, maybe then you do the reverse of the last question and you actually make it into 6 servings, right? Or maybe you make it into 7, and then you can just basically put them into smaller portions, and then you can eat multiple of those throughout the day. Next question, and there's kind of a theme with the next 3 here, and the last 3 also. I don't have a place to eat or heat food at work. So no microwave, no oven, nothing like that. Now it's time to get creative about thinking about foods that you don't have to reheat. So the best thing that you can do for this is to Google or Pinterest or Instagram no-cook meals. That is the phrase that I would Google. And you're going to find things like tuna salads, cold salads, pasta salads, like sandwiches and wraps, chia puddings, like sushi, smoothies, overnight oats, and even rice bowls are delicious cold, right? So you will find an endless amount of recipes of no-cook meals. And this also leads me into the next question. Also, one more thing about the previous question, it's totally fine not to eat hot meals all the time, right? Like there's no badge for, yay, you ate hot meals all this week, right? Nobody's giving out awards here. Next question is, I travel in my car all day. I need meals that won't spoil. So this is actually super common with a lot of my clients. I used to work on campaigns and I was in my car all day. Like I basically had no time to really stop for lunch or anything. If you are a driver or, if you're a delivery person or, whatever it is that you're doing, maybe you just travel a lot for work. You don't have time to, and you don't have the resources to heat up your food or, anything like that. So first thing that I would highly recommend you do is invest in a cooler and an ice pack. And depending on how long you are in the car in between stops, I would recommend like a pretty heavy duty solid cooler. That's something that I would definitely save up for. And then you can use a lot of the same ideas that I mentioned before in like the no-cook meals, and you could Google those as well. If you don't have a cooler or some way to keep your food cool, then try looking up no-cook travel meals, and you're going to find a ton of ideas. Actually, a lot of these, which is pretty funny, is a lot of these meals will come from camping advice boards. So like last year, my brother hiked half of the Appalachian Trail, and he had to find a lot of these meals too that were not only no cook and didn't have to be refrigerated, but weren't insanely heavy as well because he was carrying everything in his backpack. So I worked with him to try and figure out what he was going to eat the whole time and not starve, and also not eat the same thing every single day, which is actually what one of his friends did, and it sounded pretty gross by the end. I would also keep some things in your car like trail mix and nuts and jerky and bars, and you could also make something like no bake energy bites, just in case of like emergency situations where, say you didn't have time to prepare food in the morning, or you get stuck and you're really hungry, you're not gonna be home for a couple hours. Like I always have snacks in my car. Just, my swim kids actually call me snacks, which is pretty funny. And then the last one is I travel a lot. So meal prepping doesn't really make sense for me. So congratulations, you hit the jackpot because you only need to prepare meals for when you're home. No, I'm just kidding. So a couple of things that you can do here. you can actually make a few small staples that travel well. When I was researching for this question and like looking up different people's ideas and stuff, I even found articles for meals that you can make and take on the plane that are TSA friendly. I am totally guilty of this. Because I have celiac, it's really hard for me most of the time to find airplane meals that I can actually eat, especially because most of the flights that I've been taking lately that aren't international, they don't actually give you meals. They're just like peanuts or, pretzels or cookies or any of these things, which unfortunately, they all have wheat in them, so I cannot eat them. So I'm constantly, again, either bringing snacks or bringing like a Tupperware of leftovers on the plane to eat. The only two things that I wouldn't recommend you bring are like a tuna salad or hard-boiled eggs because the entire plane will hate you. And then the other thing here is just because you're not home all the time, even if you're only home, on the weekends, if you travel for work during the week, or the reverse, like if you're home during the week and you travel Friday through Monday or Friday through Sunday, it's still a good idea to meal prep things when you're home because correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, the worst thing in the world is when you come home from traveling and you don't have any food at all. Usually what my family would do is we order Thai food every single time we get home from a long road trip. And frankly, I was getting tired of pad Thai, which is kind of hard to do, I know. But one thing that you can do is say you meal prep on Monday, and you're going to be gone Thursday through Sunday. You can eat the things that you have prepped Monday through Wednesday and then freeze the rest of it. When you get home from travel, you have meals that are already prepared for you, and then you can either just defrost them in the microwave or you can defrost them in the oven. And if you don't do that, you can have pre-prepared meals for another indeterminate time, which is great because then it's basically like, oh, I already have a prepared meal and I didn't even have to do anything to prepare it this time, which is the best. Even a few meals will make a huge difference. So that's my video for this week. I'm pretty sure we're going to be doing a Q&A session in addition to this. So if you guys have any questions on the things that I have said, or if there's anything that I missed, if there are any other questions that you wanted me to address, just put them in the comments below this video and make sure you tag me in it. My name is Dana Monsees, Monsees. And then I will respond to your question. And don't forget to share your favorite, let's say, meal prep tips, or also your favorite recipes that you've tried that you want to share with everybody else, because sharing is the best.